Hey everyone, it's Jeff here with Time, Order, Purpose, Organizing. And today we are going to be talking about how to eliminate nagging. And I know you say it sounds too good to be true, and maybe it is, but I want to give you some tools on how to at least put a stop to the majority of the nagging, whether it's in the home, at work. There's three main things that I'm going to talk to you today about that should hopefully start working you towards getting rid of that awful thing of nagging and fighting and all of that good stuff over the basic things that should be being done kind of without question. So I'm going to share my screen with you here. Oh, hang on, it's not. Sometimes it takes a second to show up. Sorry about that. Oops. Technology is such a fun thing sometimes. I don't want to share that or that. What is that? Nope, that's not what I wanted to share with you. I'm not quite sure why it's not letting me share with you. Let's see what I can do here. There we go. Awesome. So today we're doing Foundations to Eliminate Nagging. We'll be on the call till about 8 o'clock, maybe a little bit earlier. I would love to take questions, have some participation, whatever we got going. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have in regards to what I'm talking about, organizing in general, or anything, really. So first I want to tell you just a little bit about me. And my story pretty much starts when I was 2 years old. My parents got divorced, and it kind of screwed up my whole world. There was so much fighting and constant battles over where we were going to be, who we were going to be with. Our parents did not communicate well between each other, and therefore it caused a lot of strife in my household between my siblings, between the kids and the parents, and there were so many other things happening. By the age of 10, I knew that I wanted to own an empire. I had so many different business ideas that they were all going to interconnect and change and cross-market each other. But my parents were so busy constantly working and doing things, for the better of our family, that no one was really around to listen. And I totally picked up on those habits of the constantly working, always being busy, striving, but not necessarily ever getting anywhere. To this day, I still battle exponentially with a severe workaholism. I am constantly working first thing in the morning, late at night, always talking about work. And now it's a little bit better because what I do is actually my passion and my purpose, which is amazing because I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur from a very young age. As I said, around 10, I already knew that I had this whole empire planned in my head. And I went to a college with an entrepreneurial degree, but I got a marketing degree because, again, no one was around to listen and help guide me. So that's really why I do what I do. I really want to be able to open up those doorways of communication and create more time and space in people's lives so that they really can listen, engage, and help build and push the people in their lives to reach for their dreams and figure out their passions and their purpose and go for those. So that's a little bit about me and why I do what I do. I've been officially opened in my business of time, order, purpose organizing for just over a year now, but I've been organizing people, my family and friends of family and things along those lines since I was in my early teens. Always getting called to help get ready for the holiday parties and things along those lines. And it's truly a passion of mine to make a difference in people's lives, to really be able to show up 100% and give them whatever it is that they need, whether it's time, energy, physical help, whatever the case may be, however I can help, I'm happy to. So I would love to ask you, what is it that you're hoping to get out of this workshop that we're doing today? We're talking about nagging. Are you looking for a quick fix? Are you looking for guidance? Are you looking for, who knows? Whatever it is, I would like you to take a moment to kind of hone in on, what were you hoping to get out of coming into this chat today, and maybe write it down so that you can see if it's been accomplished at the end. And if not, maybe I can answer some questions or maybe give you a dose of reality if you were looking for a quick fix, because unfortunately there's very few of those out there for any of our problems. The three areas that I'm going to talk to you today about in the effort to eliminate nagging are going to be communication, setting standards and expectations, and responsibility and accountability. I've found that these three areas are absolutely pertinent if you're going to minimize, eliminate, whatever you want to say, the nagging, the fighting, all of that stuff in our households, especially when we have children. I would like you to take a second here to think about, how would you explain the communication style in your house? Are you constantly yelling at each other? Do you have a lot of nonverbal communication? Are you leaving notes for people? What is the main way you communicate? Do you think it's positive? Do you think it's negative? Is it working for your family? Could it use a little fine-tuning? Do you have problem areas? What's working really great? Consider all of those things. I would really like you to have a conversation with your family at some point about what they think your communication style is and is it working for them. Maybe you're the type that leaves notes all over the place for your family, but perhaps somebody in your family has a communication style that's different than yours and notes just don't help. So these are things to consider. With that, within the communication aspect, we're going to talk about styles, opening doors, and feelings. Now, I want to warn you, this may get a little wishy-washy for some of you because too often none of us deal in feelings. So when I get there, I want you to know that feelings is not my strong suit. And therefore, I totally understand where some of you may be coming from as far as, you want me to do what? But if you could just put a little trust and faith into me, I think you'll find that what I'm going to tell you can really make a big difference. In communication, there are so many different styles and personality tests and things along those lines that we can utilize to better understand how we communicate with people. If somebody is left versus right brain, meaning they're more analytical versus creative, if you can figure out what their disc is, which has to do with personality traits and their Myers-Briggs. These are all those are tests that you can take to kind of figure out how to better deal with someone, whether they're very assertive and need a lot of information, or if they're just very touchy-feely and they go with their gut, and things along those lines. Additionally, we have things like the love languages. The 5 love languages was created, and you can look that up at the number 5 lovelanguages.com and check that out, because that is just super fabulous to understand that we all communicate differently, and it gives examples along the lines of receiving gifts and attention. What are the other ones? Sorry, my brain is not working so well today. But there's 5 love languages, and you can go check those out. I highly, highly encourage you to take that quiz, because too often we speak in our own love language versus the love languages of the people that we care about. So if your spouse is all about acts of service, but you're all about physical touch, so you're constantly, hugging them and kissing them and telling them how great they are and how much they mean to you, but really all they want you to do is vacuum the floor or do the dishes. Maybe these are things that we can consider. One of our learning styles that has to be taken in consideration for communication, because communication is so much more than just how we talk. It is very nonverbal as well. We need to consider our auditory, visual, and kinesthetic, which has to do with how we learn things. So, if we're auditory, generally hearing things or saying things aloud is going to help us understand them better, whereas visual, we need to see it, and kinesthetic, we actually need to be a part of what we're trying to learn in order for it to stick. And then there's the 4 communication styles that we see a lot of: passive aggressive, and assertive. And all of these you can utilize. You can pick one and try and go with it. We often just have to keep in mind the biggest thing to learn from the fact that there's so many different ways to interpret how people communicate is that we all do communicate differently, and we have different ways that we understand the things that we're trying to learn and how we share information. So if you can keep that in mind when dealing with your family, your friends, your coworkers, whoever it is that you're trying to better your relationship with, if you can understand how they communicate but in the best way for them, you'll probably be able to get across what you need and want from them in a much more effective and efficient way. I like to talk about opening doors with communication because it really is a great pathway to so many different things. You create better relationships. There's dynamic change that can be created through communication, communication that looks both positive and negative. If we have an issue with how something is being done, if we can communicate it in a proper way, in a way that is going to be easily understood for everyone in their own communication style, it's much easier to make positive changes to those issues than if we are being demanding to someone who doesn't take well to being demanded, or if we are coming at it in more of a submissive way when somebody just needs a leader to really say this is what should be done. We really need to understand what people's needs are and where they're coming from. When we can communicate well with each other, we also create amazing understanding. And one of the next things we'll talk about is going to be around standards and expectations, which has a lot to do with this understanding. Far too often we expect people to be mind readers, and we don't give enough detail of what we want or what we need or what we're looking for, and it creates a lot of problems. So if we can utilize our communication to the best of our ability and give full detail of what we're looking for, we'll be able to create that understanding. One of the greatest things, especially for within families, that I love about communication is that it engages input. And a family to me is supposed to be a team. It's not supposed to be, two people leading and the other two, how the kids following. It's not about the parents constantly being in charge. If we can give everyone in the home some ability to have their voice heard and give us input and let us know what they would like and what they need from the family, it can create huge, some of these other things, changes to how the household is, better relationships, and even more important, it can create action. So if somebody is stuck in a problem or a relationship or having issues with school or work or wherever it is, if we're communicating about these problems and we're sharing what's going on in our lives, and we feel that we can be open and honest, we can create action through asking for help or, things along those lines. So I highly, highly encourage you to think about how you're communicating and maybe just start making some small adjustments to how you communicate with your family and trying to help them adjust how they communicate with you. One of the things we're working on in my house is thinking before we talk. And it's very difficult, even for me sometimes, who is constantly in my head, to think before I speak, because a lot of times as humans we're in reaction mode and we need to learn to be a little bit more proactive about our actions and definitely be listening to understand versus listening to respond, which is a great segue for feelings, because I feel far too often we don't get to share our feelings. They're really frowned down upon, to have feelings, to talk about feelings, to cry in public, to whatever it is, to exhibit those feelings, especially if it's on the more negative aspect of that spectrum. It's it's become to have a very negative connotation. So within our homes, within our businesses, within our communities, if we can make this notion of sharing our feelings more normal, I believe that we can totally change a lot of how this world works. Again, we get that improved relationship, not just for the relationships that we're currently in, but for our future relationships. I personally know that as a child, we didn't really talk much about feelings. If we were angry, we would get told, no, you're not angry, go to your room. Or, we didn't necessarily get to cry in front of people. And so now in my adult life, I suffer from this feeling of constantly needing to control my feelings and actually not even knowing what a lot of feelings have felt like. I'm just exploring that in the last few years, and it's been amazingly eye-opening to understand some of these deeper, more in-depth feelings. Additionally, with the improved relations, we get the deeper connections. I think one of the deepest connections that we can create is with ourselves. we get to understand what we need and want and understand how those feelings make us feel, both good and bad. And that helps us to just, in general, have a better well-being and a better understanding of why we do what we do and why other people do what they do. The biggest tip I can give you around feelings and communication is to stop blaming. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard this, and you can YouTube it for days, look it up, but you want to get rid of that blame. Stop the "you made me feel" comments, and "it's your fault" comments. When we can phrase things more in the following: when you did this, I felt this, it's much more productive. It takes out that charge from the conversation of blaming, of it's somebody else's fault, of the consequences of it being somebody else's fault. If we can have that conversation around feelings without with taking the onus of our feelings, with being in charge of our feelings and saying, I feel this way when you do this, we can get much farther in our conversations and understand, why are you feeling that way? Because generally it's something that's happened before, whether in that current relationship or many other relationships, or it's something that you're dealing with from your past. Most of the time it doesn't have to do with the specific situation so much as situations leading up to what we're talking about when we have a feeling that we feel like we need to blame somebody else for. And so one of the things around our communication, everything, is having standards. So can you think of any standards you have set in your home? One of the greatest examples I like to use is, we have a general, unless you're living on the beach, a general standard for most establishments: no shoes, no shirt, no service. So I challenge you to think about this notion of a standard, and do you have any notion that is well communicated in your home? It could be going back to my childhood and my parents' childhood, having to be inside by the time the street lights came on, or, please and thank yous are standards around your home. Whatever it is in your home, I would like you to write it down and just take note of it. I always laugh because people have this notion of what something should mean. And for some things, there is a very clear and definite definition. However, in my mind, the English language has become completely relative. There is always somebody else has a different meaning or a different way of seeing something. I think we all generally have a good idea of what a chair means. But do we all have the same idea of what clean means, or what organized means, or what blue is? We all have these different notions for words in the English language that create amazing confusion, because my standard for something is not your standard for something, and unless a standard and expectation is clearly defined and communicated, it's nearly impossible for everyone to be happy across the board with the result of a situation. Some areas that I highly, highly encourage you to set standards in would be around being clean and organized. Do we have chores, homeworks, projects, manners, our values? And Values in particular is a very important one for me, both home, work, wherever you are. Values and morals set the compass for where we want to go. So if we're not aware of what our values are and what our standard is for maintaining those values, life can get pretty hectic pretty quickly. There's plenty of places that you can set standards around, and it could include, how much you're working and what's expected of you during that work time, to any of the things listed on there. And I highly, highly encourage you to think about in your head, what is the current standards for these places and areas? And then later have a conversation with somebody else and see what their standards are. Maybe don't even tell them what yours is first, or ask them to write it down and see how they compare. If you're working on a team, if you're worrying about your home, your business, whatever the case may be, it's a really good idea to see what each other's standards are around ideas that you have to work with on a regular basis. So if you're in an office, cleanliness or organization are definitely things that you need to consider. What are the standards? If you're getting a new roommate, what does your standard of clean mean? And if you need to use pictures, again, going back to those communication styles, if you need to use pictures, if you want to explain it in writing, whatever the case may be, understand what your standard is and how it differs from other people. Now, for me, when I talk about expectations, I generally try to give a range. There's always going to be that kind of regularly expected level of wherever we're at. So on a very average day, this is what is expected, of you. And then I like to be able to have a little buffer room. So at the very bare minimum, this is what is expected. And when special occasions happen, this is what is expected. And some people will always say, well, your best should always be, you should always expect your best. And I totally agree with that to some degree. Because honestly, if you're working through life, life gets busy and it gets the best of you. So sometimes your best is not always available. And it's really great to have some additional levels so that you know where you're at and when it's time to really kick it in gear and make a difference. Now, the biggest thing about standards and expectations are that they must be communicated. And not just in a way that you understand, in a way that your whole team, your whole family, your whole organization can understand. It's super, super important that you have examples for those visual people. You have a detailed description for those auditory people, that perhaps you help the kinesthetic people walk through those things. You are able to really make sure that you hit on all aspects of understanding and learning so that there are no questions. And that should be the top priority, is making sure that there are no questions around those standards and expectations. And whether you have to do that anonymously, whether you have to do that individually, however it works, make sure that everyone is on board about what the expectations are at all levels, and B, that there's nothing to question, that it is so simple and so spilled out that a random person coming from the outside into, whether it is your home, your business, your organization, your club, wherever it is, make sure that a total stranger could come in and understand what is expected in any of the areas that you're setting standards. So whether it's your cleanliness, whether it's attendance, whether it is attitude, wherever you're setting a standard, make sure that it is simplified to the bare basics of understanding. With that, I'm going to move into the responsibilities in your home. Do you have set responsibilities? Is someone always on dish duty or is on dish duty every Tuesday? Does someone regularly clean the house? Is someone on trash duty? Is someone on sales calls? Is someone on invitation writing? Whatever area that you're focusing on, home, business, project, wherever you're at, who is responsible for what? And this can sometimes be difficult because a lot of times it's like, well, it's whoever gets to it first. And while there's definitely some things that this can work for, especially if you have it in your standards and expectations that, let's say we're talking about dishes at home. If you come in and you see dishes in the sink, the first person to see them needs to do the dishes or unload the dishes or whatever the case may be. Or, in the office, if the copier runs out of paper while you're making copies, you need to refill all of the paper. Whatever, those are, responsibilities that can be kind of wide-ranging as long as you have that standard and expectation set. But think about specific jobs and duties. Is there anybody that's responsible for specific things, or is it kind of just all up in the air? When I talk about responsibility and accountability, I really was a little confused at first of which is which and what means what, and they seem so in line with each other, but perhaps they have to be different, right? They're different words, and so what was the difference? And one of the greatest things that I was able to find was that responsibility was the owner of a task. So an individual activity, per se, that needed to get completed. So, if we're talking about homes, Johnny's in charge of sweeping the floor and cleaning the counters. Well, as far as accountability, that's the owner of the outcome. Let's say Johnny's sister Sally is in charge of cleaning up after a party. So she designated Johnny to do the floors and the counters, but if he does a poor job, she is accountable for that outcome. So she needs to make sure that Johnny understands what is expected of him, what are the standards that he needs to take that task to in order for Sally to say it's a job well done, therefore the people she's accountable to will say it's a job well done. And responsibility and accountability work in a very interesting way because you can take it positively and negatively, one or the other or both. I'm a big, big believer in rewards and consequences. And I know some people veer towards one or the other, but I think both are actually pretty necessary. And this comes into play with those standards and expectations. If someone is regularly getting to that best circumstance expectation, while everybody else is kind of hanging out in that regularly expected, perhaps they should get a reward. And if that one person is, not meeting the expectations or really only laying around on that minimally acceptable line, perhaps they need to have some consequences or rewards for getting to the next level. You have to know, again, it goes back to that communication and personality styles, you have to know who you're working with. If someone is very motivated by rewards, and whether that's money or title or recognition, understand what motivates the people that you're working with. Whether, again, it could be a consequence, it could be a reward. Teenagers, if we're taking away their cell phones, that could be a great motivator for them to act better, for them to get things done. But we also have to use that sparingly, because when we start using the same things over and over again, it can lose its effect. And these are things that I would highly, highly encourage you to just think about and consider. Of what rewards do you have in place? What consequences do you have in place? Do you even have anything in place? Have you thought about it but not done it? And if you don't have anything in place, what can you start implementing now? Maybe allowance is not where you want to head. Maybe it's working more towards a family goal. If you're talking home life, how can we all work towards taking a trip to Disney? And in the office, is your team very food motivated? Maybe everybody can work towards a 2-hour lunch out together. Think of the positive rewards and consequences that you can dish out and try and put them in place. Do you have those different consequences and rewards already in place? Again, just kind of going over those questions. Does it have to be, jobs well done or jobs badly done? Where does the rewards and consequences sit on your standard and expectation lines? And that's really the basics of what I have for you today about the foundations of eliminating nagging. I hope that you guys found that entertaining and interesting. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at jessica@toporganizing.com. This is just a small portion of what I do in my Foundations to Getting Organized program. It's a 6-week program. They're all live webinars like this that also get recorded for you to use afterwards. And I have, session that we work together, 2 hours of phone call organization time that you get with it, and a needs assessment and all of that good stuff. So there's a lot of stuff involved to help you get on your way to getting your family or business organized and helping with the 3 things that we talked about today. So the communication, the setting expectations and standards, and that responsibility versus accountability piece. That for me is super, super important, because I think far too often today we have this disease of entitlement. People far too often just think that they should get things, that they are entitled to be treated a certain way or receive certain things, and I think it's a bunch of baloney, honestly. We should all have to work at least a little hard and put in our time and all of those wonderful things to get where we need to go. And while, yes, getting help is amazing, getting handed things all of your life doesn't teach you much of anything, especially how to be a better person, how to give to other people, and how to truly make a difference in the world. And if you couldn't tell, that is definitely one of my very, very high values, is making a difference. And so if there's any way that I can help make a difference in your world or in the world of someone that you know and love, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to sit down and give you some tips or, you know, offer some of my time, whatever I can do. I hope you all have a most fabulously wonderful evening, and I look forward to chatting with you soon. Have a great day.